During the 70s, there was not just a revival in football in Scotland. There was a whole cultural revival. All sorts of plays were being written, tremendous music was being sung. The Scottish pop groups as well, you know, were breaking through in a way that many hadn't in the past. And as I've said before, football's part of the tartan.
Just gotta tell her anyway. Bye bye baby, baby, goodbye.
The 70s. From kipper ties to platform shoes, from Rod Stewart to the Bay City Rollers, it's a time of brash Scottish self-assertion. If you're going to Auchenshuggle, be sure to wear some tartan in your flares. We insist on our right to be different, even if it means looking like this. But before we say hello to the new decade, we have to say goodbye to the last one, and to the 1970 World Cup, when a Lisbon Lion mauls his German opponent in a qualifying match that we have to win.
Gemmell, fouled surely, referee waved, oh dear, oh dear, oh that was uncalled for. What a sad ending to this match.
We're 2 or 3 minutes away from being knocked out of the World Cup, and I said, well, if we don't get a goal, I'll get a kick. We can always beat the Germans at fighting. We can never beat them at football.
Discipline is better maintained by the unions at UCS, where the workers led by Jimmy Reid succeed in keeping their shipyards open.
And there will be no hooliganism, there will be no vandalism, there will be no bevying, because the world is watching us, and it's our responsibility to conduct ourselves responsibly and with dignity and with maturity.
And here is this people, citizens of a small nation, the one arena, if not, the only arena in which our nation is recognised in itself is football. So football carries with it tremendous hopes and aspirations for us.
In 1971, the hopes of one Glasgow club were realised beyond their wildest dreams when they beat their more fancied neighbours in a sensational League Cup final.
We got to the final of a tournament where we were going to go out and enjoy ourselves. It was a very relaxed atmosphere. We knew Celtic were riding on the crest of a wave. But on the day, we had 4 shots at goal in the first half, and the 4 of them hit the back of the net.
Day, everything seemed to go for Partick Thistle, and they deserved to win. And I think shortly after that, we went to Firhill and battered them.
Confusion reigns when decimalisation is introduced. Many of us feel we're a few new pence short of the full shilling.
Next Monday is February the 15th. Do you know what happens on that day?
It's no value. Oh, it's decimal currency.
What does that mean, though?
Well, you have to change over to money.
Well, what's 5 new pence?
Shilling.
What's 20 new pence?
2 shillings. 3 shillings. No, 2 shillings. No,
5 new pence is 3 shillings.
Next Monday is February the 15th. Do you know what day that is in Britain?
D-Day.
D-Day.
What's that going to mean, then?
We're going to pay more.
2 European semi-finals take place in Glasgow on the same night in 1972 as Britain prepares to join Europe. Celtic go out of the European Cup.
And Dixie Deans misses it.
Rangers march on to the final of the Cup Winners' Cup, deciding not just to join Europe but to conquer it. At the end, Scottish over-exuberance and Spanish over-policing result in defeat being snatched from the jaws of victory.
This is a serious moment. The Rangers players trying to get back. Willie Waddle is submerged. Absolute bedlam. Absolute bedlam.
It's all come flooding back. The stadium's changed a wee bit actually because there's a moat around it. But I was sitting behind the press box up there on that side, and the fans actually came from this side. And I always remember a German football writer. I don't know, he was a football writer. He was sober at the time, but he said, "Oh, the tactics were superb." And we said, "Well, wait a minute, we were 3 up and nearly lost it." You know, no, not the team. He said, "The fans." He said, "They let the police go so far, and then they turned on them." He said it was like a pincer movement.
Basically what happened behind the scenes was that about 15-20 minutes after the game had finished, we went into a room that was not much bigger than this. And it was basically a situation, winners of the European Cup, Winners' Cup 1972, Glasgow Rangers, there's the cup, now get on your bike and get out of here as quick as you can. What should have been a magnificent climax to a magnificent European campaign ended up in a big, like a balloon bursting.
Everybody was sick because it wasn't a celebration. It was, we knew that the papers back home would make a bigger play of the carry on with the police than they would of winning the trophy, you know. But when we get back to Glasgow on the Friday, we were back in time to see Rangers going round Ibrox with the cup, which that was when we celebrated, you know.
Colin, you haven't scored 2 more important goals for a long, long time. Which of the 2 was the vital one? Do you think the first one or the one you got later on?
I only scored one.
Oh, sorry, beg your pardon. What game was I at?
VAT, the brand new tax for 73 adds extra pence to everything. But what you lose on the roundabouts, you gain on the swings.
It's not so much swings and roundabouts as revolving doors for the Scotland team manager when Bobby Brown is sacked. He offers words of encouragement to his successor, Tommy Docherty.
And I hope that Scotland will have a very good season in the season ahead and that they will qualify for the 1974 World Cup Championships.
No one knows the secret of the flamboyant Docherty's success. It's rumoured that his team terrifies the opposition not only with their football but also with their dress sense.
You wear it well, a little old-fashioned, but that's all right.
The Doc seems to find an instant cure for Scotland's ills as he launches them in a successful World Cup campaign with 2 consecutive victories against Denmark.
Losing my head, I sure do want you to know that you wear it well. There ain't a lady and the man so fine, oh my. Remember them baseball parties, your brother's karate, the all-day rock and roll shows.
We got a good squad of players together, and I like to think I set something off. I never really felt it was a full-time job. It was, in between internationals, there was little or nothing to do. You were going to matches and looking at players, but how do you go and look at Dalgleish, who's world class? Why go and watch him unless you want that nice afternoon out to see a world-class player in action? But it was more of a social thing.
It's too good to last. Doc's lured to Manchester United for big bucks, and he's playing his cards close to his chest.
Is it conceivable that you could be the Manchester United manager and continue as on a part-time basis as a Scotland boss?
No idea.
Do you want it to be done quickly?
I'd like to say.
We possibly see developments over the weekend.
I'd like to say, Alan. You're struggling for questions now, aren't you?
Doc's successor could hardly be more different. A quiet man, Willie Ormond is the manager of St Johnstone and a former member of Hibs' famous 5. He gets off to the worst possible start at Hampden when the old enemy beat us by an infamous 5 goals.
Away once more, and Clark has put it in. They've left themselves with a lot to do, and it's another one.
After the game, Ormond reveals the determination which will make him the most successful Scotland manager ever.
And there it is, number 5.
I went down to Glasgow with these players, and I spoke to them, and well, we didn't get very much training done, but I listened more than I spoke, and in the future I'll be doing the speaking.
There's a crisis of leadership in the government too. Oil shortages and industrial disputes result in power cuts and the imposition of the 3-day week. A national state of emergency is declared. In 1973, the crisis deepens when Czechoslovakia take an early lead at Hampden in the crucial World Cup qualifier.
There's a shot and it's a good one. And it's a goal! And that's disaster. Absolute disaster for Scotland. Big Jim Holton going down into the box to try to get to it. Over it comes. Holton's there and it's there! Holton scores! That's the one. Beautiful ball. Bremner trying to make room. It's the post! Unbelievable misfortune for Scotland. Still dangerous. Morgan flinging it across. Jordan! It's there! Jordan scores! Magnificent! Superb goal! There's the cross. Watch Jordan, number 16. Superb header. Keeper can't reach it. The ball's on the net and it's 2-1. Referee looking at his watch. And that's it! That is it! Congratulations, Scotland. Well done, boys.
Willie Ormond has steered us to the World Cup finals for the first time in 16 years. Now Scotland's on the march.
I mean, I remember people going round about me, going absolutely spare and over the top. It was far more than simply winning a football match. And I think at that time I read about some SFA official saying, that's us, where we should be. We're in the World Cup and we're heading for independence at the same time. There was that tremendous buoyant feeling around Scotland.
The possibility of Scotland becoming an oil-rich country dazzles us, only to disappear like all the World Cups we've never won. The Queen pushes a button which officially starts North Sea oil flowing into the Grangemouth refinery, the oil which should have made Scotland wealthy. But at least the Scotland squad strikes it rich when their sponsors award each of them a free car.
Well, I'll keep this one and I'm going to sell my other one. So if anybody wants a Ford, they can get in touch with me.
The hopes of the nation are eloquently expressed in a song whose lyrics are almost unbearably moving.
Yabba-dabba-doo, we support the boys in blue, and it's easy, easy. Yabba-dabba-doo.
As part of the World Cup build-up, the squad trains at Largs for the home internationals. One player, however, goes sadly adrift.
Me and Sandy were coming up to a walk along the beach and the boats were sitting. And I thought, we had a few jars, you know, and we were talking all times, talking about Rangers Celtic games and such. I says, you fancy a wee clear ahead in the boats? There were 3 or 4 of them sitting. He says, aye, certainly. We turned 1 hour, just here. And I get in, I says, you're right. You shoved me off, kicked me off. And I thought, I'm all right, I've got the oars, but there wasn't any rocks and I've done it again. They're not. I can't believe this. She's at it. Hey. Are you getting me back in again?
Jimmy Johnson and the incident at Largs? Not really, no. No, he got me in a lot of trouble, he did. I had to phone the Coast Guard out and get him in, like Barrahandy coming into Largs Harbour.
Can you believe this? And went into the room and the presser was sitting waiting a statement, and I says, well, to be honest, Denis decided we'd like to do a wee bit of fishing. And I put it all into him. And he was like...
I hope he's watching this programme. Because I can't swim, man. I mean, I couldn't dive in and get him at all. But I waited for him. I did wait for him.
Went out on Saturday, we beat the English, which is always priority as far as everybody in Scotland's concerned, and press as well. And Billy Bremner came at the end of the game, he says, wee man, he says, come on. He says, let's go and do the business with these guys up in the press box. And we proceeded to give him, thanks very much, 2-0. You take it though.
If anybody has any current doubts about the capabilities of the Scots, I've just been told, in order to depress my spirits as much as possible, that at 3:40 Scotland were winning 2-0. This is where I cease to be an Englishman and become a representative of the United Kingdom.
Ted Heath gets another result he doesn't want at the general election. Harold Wilson forms a minority Labour government. Yes, we had Labour governments back then. Scotland has more global concerns on its mind.
With Scotland's opening match only hours away, World Cup fever has certainly arrived.
Oh, easy. Just watch us when we win the World Cup and put the camera in the right place, because we're winning.
We were a nation again. We knew where we were going, and we were going to go into the big league with everyone else, because the World Cup really was the big league. And in a sense, the United Nations was the political World Cup where you could participate as well. These were great days to be alive in, which will come as a great surprise to many young Scots at the moment, because these are not good days for them to be alive in.
The opening ceremony gives us the chance to see who has the most embarrassing national stereotype. All the world seems to love the Scots, all except the English media, who as usual call themselves the British media. They do their best to ensure that the Scots lion stays in its cage, but Willie Ormond is ready for them.
Hello, Mr. Ormond. Ormond.
Any hangovers this morning, Mr. Ormond?
You can keep your chicken remarks to yourself. Just remember what you're saying.
What's the problem, Mr. Ormond?
What's the problem? The press and television and cameras was banned from training. This was done 3 days ago for this morning.
You object to the British cameras being here?
I object to all the cameras being here, not British, all the cameras. And press.
Why is that, Mr. Ormond?
Because we want our session to ourselves. We want to work tactics. We can't work tactics when all this is going on.
You're going to have
it's simple as that.
You're going to have the stadium cleared?
I'm going to have it cleared if it's possible.
Now, Ormond was one of the last of the generation that actually served during the war. He'd been in the Navy and suffered a lot of trials and tribulations in the Navy. So he came from an era of football people who knew not only football but the world outside, and for whom football was an immensely uncomplicated game. All you had to do was pick the right side. That was his great thing, that he could pick the right team, which sounds very easy, but which is the most difficult thing to do in international football. And just before the competition started, Ormond arranged an 11-a-side practice game between all his players, where they fought and scrambled and kicked each other. I mean, one of the great games of football I've ever seen on the practice field. And everybody went, tut-tut, isn't that dreadful? In fact, it meant that they were ready to play for their country. And once the whistle blew, they did play.
Andrews comes back to help his defence out, which is under a lot of pressure at the moment. Jordan up. It comes for Lorimer. What a goal! That is the way to tap him away. Peter Lorimer. That's a goal! It's given! Jordan has scored it!
And then we have the classic Scottish test. Scotland against the world champions, Brazil. And if we played that match another 10 times, we would win it 10 times.
After about 20 minutes, after the initial shock, I was saying to the guys, like, hey, these ain't as good as we thought they were. You know, now we can beat this lot. And I think they sensed that, because after the first 20 minutes, when they sort of were on top a wee bit, then they started to freeze a wee bit on the occasion. And really, we played extremely well and should have won the game.
Lorimer, long way out. There it goes. What a shot! Lorimer again. In comes Jordan. Down the heads and down the front. An unbelievable miss by Billy Bremner. Inches away from the sensation of the season.
I've heard this all the time, this miss against Brazil, and I can remember things vividly, mostly about football, but I can't really remember this. And then somebody showed me a film of it, and it came to the back stick, and a ball must have came across, and it's hit me in the foot and just went past the post. But I can't really remember it as a miss, you know. I mean, I can remember the misses I did miss, but that one, I didn't really put it down as a miss.
Maybe we've remembered it as a miss all these years because we've cast ourselves as the tragic losers. Maybe it's the miss that never was. Tragically, we go out in goal difference, despite Joe Jordan's late equaliser against Yugoslavia.
And it's a goal!
The Yugoslavs scored 9 against Zaire, prompting a conspiracy theory.
The Zaire coach turned out to be Yugoslavian, so whether there was any skullduggery there, I don't know, but that was probably Scotland's, or the closest Scotland came to actually qualifying for the next phases in the World Cup.
If only we'd scored more against Zaire. If only wee Billy's ricochet had gone in. If only Bonnie Prince Charlie hadn't turned back at Derby. But we haven't disgraced ourselves. We've done ourselves proud. And the fans will have some tales to tell.
We were in a parkland in a hotel with a balcony having lunch, and there was a lot of lads there who were obviously stationed with the British Army in the Rhine. But after they'd had a couple of beers, these Scots Army lads decided that, they wanted a dip. So they drooped down the wall at the front of the balcony, dashed down to the pool, took off their kilts, displaying themselves in all their natural finery, the T-shirts and everything else, and went into the pool. And a German woman came running out of the hotel, and I thought, they're for it now, she's going to call the Polizei. This is going to be very embarrassing, naked fans arrested in German Park. And in fact, what she did was picked up some binoculars, and she stood at the end of the balcony and watched as they dried themselves with their Glengarrys, put the kilts back on, put the sweatshirts back on, climbed back up the balcony and sat down and finished their beers. It was wonderful.
But they were the first side to come home from a World Cup ever unbeaten and not having won the trophy. So it was a wonderful experience. It was an experience of innocence. It was an experience of people wanting to play for their country. I mean, Sandy Jardine, when we went back after the last match and they knew they were out and they were having a concert, people like Lonnie Donegan were in the hotel and players were singing and just having a good time. And Sandy whispered to me, he said, "Don't ever write this." He said, "But I'd have paid my way here and played for nothing." And it was just a wonderful Scottish experience.
And it was, we felt a wee bit unfair that we had lost through a difference of a goal, but like you say, it restored the pride of the Scottish people.
Everybody could have pride in this tremendous quality of Scottish football that was demonstrated there, and Scottish character that was demonstrated there. And I remember the team coming back at Glasgow were hailed as heroes.
We come home in the role for which all our history has prepared us, the gallant losers. Glorious defeat feels just like winning as the team which outplayed the world champions is taken to the nation's heart. Willie Ormond and his squad have conducted themselves with dignity in the face of the hostile English media. The quiet man has come home to his own folk, a genuine Scottish hero.
But we did something in Germany that other teams didn't do. We went forward. And we played football and we tried to score goals, and this is most of the other teams they defended. We did our best, we went forward, and this is my idea of football.
Well, Willie, from all of Scotland, welcome home and congratulations.